Hi, everybody. David Nour back with you for another episode of the Sales Community's Tech Sales Insights with my co-host, Randy Seidl. Hello, Randy.
Hey, Nour. How you doing?
Doing great. Good to see you. Actually saw you in person this last week.
We did. Martha's Vineyard. You're kind enough to, we went out on the boat fishing with Colin Mahoney. He did a great job finding the fish. You didn't do such a great job pulling them in. And nice of you to come to my son's baseball game as well.
And in our normal approach of the show must go on, our scheduled guest, Dan Wright, unfortunately was under the weather, but we've got a great pinch hitter in Ben Taylor. Hello, Ben.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. This will be fun.
It's great to have you. Thanks for pinch hitting. For our audience who may not know anything about you, can you briefly start?
Sorry. Just to be clear, so under the weather sometimes means different things. Dan is legit sick. We don't think it's COVID related, so our thoughts and prayers are with him that he gets better. But genuinely, Ben, thank you very much. He stepped in literally like an hour ago. So Holly from Dan's office, we're scrambling, doing some searching, and everybody said, all right, grab Ben if you can. So Ben, really appreciate you stepping up here, and sure, it'll be fantastic.
As I think as our audience going to hear Ben's story and his involvement with the company, it actually will be a great fit. But Ben, let's start with your background, a little about where you've been, what you've done, and how you've arrived here.
Yeah, well, my background starts in chemical engineering. I had an emphasis in biomedical. I was planning on going to medical school. Thank goodness that didn't happen. I went and worked for Intel and Micron instead. And I fell in love with programming, specifically high performance computing. So for people that don't know what that is, it's big computers doing big things. And for me, that meant those big things must be valuable. So if I have a computer crying for a week, it must produce something valuable. That's actually not true, that it's going to produce something valuable. But that was very interesting to me. It kind of awoke it kind of awoke the inner geek in me. So I worked for Intel and Micron for 5 years. I had an opportunity to go work at a hedge fund. So I worked as a quant at a hedge fund. And then I joined a Sequoia Capital company called HireView. I was their chief data scientist for 4 years, built out their team. And then I got the itch to do a startup 4 years ago. So I was one of the co-founders of Zeph.ai and, and chase the go-to-market, build a product, figure out how to sell it. And then we joined DataRobot a little over a year and a half ago.
So middle of this pandemic, Dan and company decide to acquire your company.
Yeah, it was actually pretty stressful because we had all the signatures, and it was literally the week that Trump canceled flights in the U.S. so the world's ending. And the deal's not done until it's done, and signatures don't mean anything. So I was pretty anxious. I was very grateful to join DataRobot. I've been a big fan of the company. I've seen their growth in the past, and they're doing some incredible things. So I've been thrilled to be here. But that wasn't a guarantee during the pandemic.
That's awesome. So talk about DataRobot. For our audience who may not know anything about the company, how would you describe what the company does? And I'm always curious about the problems you're fundamentally solving.
Yeah, so I think to understand DataRobot, you really have to understand the history of AI or artificial intelligence. So 10 years ago, if you said, I want to build a lead scoring model for sales, I don't want to call every prospect. I want a computer to rank them, and I'll call the most important ones. That sounds useful. 10 years ago, you might have to hire a PhD physicist or someone ridiculous, and they would spend many, many months squirreling away doing experimental work, trying to build something useful. And in most cases, they would fail. And so Jeremy, the co-founder of the original founder of DataRobot, thought this should be easier. How do we get some momentum here? How do we build out this idea of automated machine learning? How do we democratize AI and make it easier for people to use? And I think the vision of DataRobot has come a long way. So we're to the point now that you don't have to program, you don't have to have this statistical foundation to do unbelievable things. So we can do things now in an hour that 3 years ago it would be considered a PhD thesis. But the how doesn't matter. It's really what are you doing? Because who gives a crap about the how if it's not offering value, right? So I'm sure that's something we'll discuss on this episode.
And your official title is a Chief AI Evangelist. Tell me or tell us what that means. What does a day in the life of Ben look like?
Yeah, so a lot of tech companies have evangelists, evangelist groups, and I kind of see evangelism as living in between marketing and maybe engineering. So they can they can produce content that is going to be much more emotional. It's going to persuade an audience more than engineers could, but they will also bring some technical credibility and some teeth, maybe into marketing that maybe your typical marketer might not have that foundation. So, building trust in a sales call, it helps to have someone who has a very strong STEM experience foundation, but also understands storytelling. So, despite my technical background, I am a huge fan of storytelling. Storytelling is it's black magic. You can do things in the sales process that people think are impossible.
Randy, over to you.
Yeah. So in your role, I mean, you must see all levels and skill sets on the sales paradigm, right? So maybe start with some of the good that you see in terms of impressive sales folks, individual contributors on up to leadership, and then maybe as a follow-on, then kind of some of the bad or not so good that you see.
Yeah. So, and I like this question because I'll throw myself into the bad. So I've been bad. I've been bad before. I joke that every gray hair on my chin is a mistake. And so if I say anything useful, it's tied to multiple mistakes. So bad is if you care more about the sale than the value. If you're trying to push a platform, like if I'm trying to sell you and if I say, Randy, you need to buy DataRobot, imagine what you could do with it. That's bad. That's actually immature when in the value focused sales cycle. Where now we've good is you fight for value, you focus on value. Consumption is not a proxy for value. You might hope it is. But I've personally experienced where that's not true. I need to figure out how I can map your problem to value in a way that you get promoted or that you can justify this SaaS contract.
Oh, that's great. But if you think about some of the specifics around, maybe a couple specific nuggets on, hey, here's great behavior, and then here's some stuff that is just really stupid.
Yeah, so this is tricky. This is specific to AI sales. One of the things we've made mistakes on in the past that I personally have is this idea of a subject matter expert. So we're going to go solve your problem for you. Let's go back to the lead scoring process. The mistakes made in the past is they just have a bunch of really smart like physicists and different people. We go build a model. What do we know about sales? What do we know about these inputs or features in Salesforce that matter to you? And we would go do it without you. And I'm a huge believer now, you need to have the subject matter expert in the room from the beginning. And it's not about director, VP. It's not about their title. It's about who's done this the longest. Find me the human that's done this process for 10 years. I want them in the room at the beginning, and we're going to figure this out together. So it really is collaboration. That's the thing I've learned the hard way, that I think there's a level of arrogance in the past that comes from data science that they've, I've got a PhD in physics. We can do everything. Whatever your domain is, we'll ramp on it in a few minutes. That's not true. But I think that's been the mindset from the past.
And to build on that, Ben, you want that expertise in the room from the beginning. Is that as much around really identifying the right problem, the business problem we're trying to solve, as well as maybe ideation on the solution? Or why at the beginning? Why is that so important to have them involved early and often?
It's two reasons, really. One of them is we're to the point now with storytelling that AI is no longer really a black box that can tell a story. We think the lead scoring model we think these are the features in Salesforce that are driving this decision, account size, etc. And I want the subject matter expert to call foul. I want the subject matter expert to say, I think this model is, it's full of crap. I don't think it's working. I want them to call out something specific. I want them to kind of be the canary in the cave to let us know. But if it is working, a data scientist will defend a model with an accuracy, an AUC score. They'll use some statistic. That doesn't mean anything in business. The subject matter experts more likely to help us translate it into a KPI that they were already measuring before we showed up. So the best thing you can share is a single number with a dollar amount. If you can't get there, back into a KPI that they were already tracking in before you showed up. And a lot of people miss that. I would try to hard sell a model to you guys to say my AUC score is 0.9. And the data scientists would celebrate that.
So build on that a second, and let's take a macro view. There's a lot of myths and misperceptions about AI, and its real impact, its real viability. It seems to be a catch-all phrase for a lot of different things that people are doing. Talk about the top 3 to 5 AI, again, myths and misperceptions you're seeing in the market. Number one. And who are you guys calling on? Are you still in the technical room? Are you calling on the CIOs and CISOs and that audience, or is it increasingly you're calling more on the business unit leaders?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, I think some of the common misperceptions with AI is how do I want to stack rank things? I think the first thing is this idea of automation. Some people are scared of AI. So when we come in, we're going to automate all the jobs away. And so we have some people that resist it. And that's not what I've seen firsthand. Because if I come in and automate a process or augment that process, that's actually doing those people a favor. They can finally start doing more creative work. Because think if I'm an underwriter in insurance, I've just got my head down. I'm doing the same process I've done for the last 10 years. I haven't innovated that process. When you bring AI into the picture, I can finally start innovating it. And so I think AI taking everyone's jobs away, that's not what we're seeing. If anything, allows them to do more creative work. The second misconception is that AI is a black box. You can't understand it. And maybe the third one is this idea. There's a lot of FUD in the market in media. So fear, uncertainty, and doubt that AI is evil. It amplifies bias. It's going to do these terrible things. It's going to amplify sexism, racism, ageism, etc. And we see examples of that, but that's not true if you're proactive. So one of the things we care about at DataRobot is this. We have an entire department of trust. So we have a whole department focusing on how can we trust AI systems more? How can we prevent them from misbehaving? Because there are AI applications in the future that are life and death, right? Like we saw that with COVID. If you ship the wrong medical supplies to the wrong hospital, people die. And that's where AI is moving. AI is moving into the space where it will make the biggest decisions that impact your business and could impact human lives. So we have to get it right. But part of that is this dance between human and machine.
For our audience, if you just joined us, you're listening to Ben Taylor, the Chief AI Evangelist at DataRobot. And we're having a fascinating conversation about myths and misperceptions of AI and actually fundamental problems that you're trying to solve. Randy, let's go to you.
Sure. So if you think about use cases, we have a sales audience mostly on here. So if I'm CEO, CRO at a whatever size company, what are some potential use cases that might be helpful for me in looking at AI?
Yeah, AI can impact any department. So if you're in marketing, we have marketing examples. If you're in sales, if you're in finance, if you're insurance, trying to think of some. We actually have a website called I'm gonna find the domain right now. It's DataRobot Pathfinder, where we have some of these applications in there where you can go through and sorry to be doing this live. I'm just looking it up right now to refresh my
no
brain.
problem.
So
but I would imagine kind of sales forecasting, turnover, the headcount, the people size, kind of where should you go sell? All right. Wait, nice comment here from Frederick. Thank you so much. Some customers think that AI is some kind of black magic.
Well, I want to turn this question upside down. So I'm going to ask you guys, can you come up with a job that doesn't need AI? So I'm saying AI can be used everywhere. So the challenge now is, can you suggest a job in the future that won't use AI somehow?
My perception is it's and I appreciate the way you positioned it. It is a augmenter of knowledge work. But if my work doesn't include application of data and insights from that data to do some of the heavy lifting, I'm thinking of my garbage collector.
Yeah.
Not sure how he would benefit from AI. Now the route, right, that they pick up, because you don't want to pick up empty bins, right? I've seen examples of that, kind of intelligently learning the best routes, right? But I think again, it's augmenting. It's and Ben, you got to appreciate this. Randy and I talked about this. in my latest book, Curve Benders, I wrote about today, we use technology to augment our work, right? I use a spreadsheet to augment my analysis. I believe there's this fundamental shift where, and you brought it up, through our creativity, through all the things that we can do that the technology can't, we're going to augment technology. And I think that's a fascinating shift that a lot of us are living through. Randy, your thoughts on who couldn't benefit from AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think at a functional level, any kind of C-suite executive, whatever area you have, finance, sales, marketing, operations, engineering, I mean, they all could, right? I mean, who wants to know kind of faster, better? It's almost like, okay, where are you heading? I think, traditionally, operations and analysis always was the kind of look in the rearview mirror, and AI really helps you kind of put your foot on the gas in terms of, okay, what's that direction where you should be going, right? How do you make better decisions faster that impact the bottom line?
So Ben, let's build on that. Is that the first hurdle, is to identify the business use case of this? Like what fundamental problem we're trying to solve?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the first hurdle. I love getting someone from the business side in the conversation because I feel like, good, there's an adult in the room. There's someone that understands payroll, paying bills, got to find value. But the first step is you want to find as many use cases as possible and figure out what's feasible, what can we do in a short amount of time that will offer the most value. I think one of the things I mentioned to you guys before the show is early on when I started Zeph.ai in the sales process, I was embarrassed to mention price. So we get to the SaaS contract and we would say it's 40,000, 80,000, 200,000 to mention the price. I felt uncomfortable. And this all comes back to value. If you have clear value, then it doesn't matter what the price is. If I'm saying, hey, it's going to be a $2 million or $10 million a year SaaS contract, I can say that with full confidence if I think I'm finding a multiplier of that on the value, right? And that was something I didn't understand early on, is if I'm selling you a platform and hoping you find value, I should feel embarrassed. I should be concerned about the price because you might spend too much. You might not find value during the first year.
And that value can't, Randy and I've been at this for a while as well, and I know you have as well. The value can't be just something I espouse. It's got to be, you got to get conceptual agreement from that business user, business owner of how will they be better off because of what we bring, right? So they have to kind of agree on, if we're able to do this, then here's the upside, or here's the savings, or here's the efficient, optimized way for us to do that. Is that accurate? Is that the way? So how do you define value in the AI world?
Yeah, there's definitely a bridge between what the models are doing and what the business understands. And I would love for the business to cross that bridge, but sometimes you have to cross it for them. And so one of the funny ways to cross it for them is you make a lot of assumptions. So if I'm doing like a model trying to fast track your hiring to accelerate hiring, I might say the average salary of these employees, the average time to hire is this. I'm going to make a bunch of these assumptions. I'm going to say, I'm estimating it's going to save you $2 million a year. And then you can push back. You can say, I don't believe you. And then we can review my assumptions and you can help me fix these assumptions. So I'm a big fan of, never lie, make a bunch of assumptions, give them a number. And if they have issues with that number, back into how you did it. And then they might correct you and say, oh, they're not paid that much, or, oh, our time to hire is not this. So I'm a big fan of that.
Frederick had a great comment, which is, we're also not, I don't think many of us are aware of that. It really is all around us, from ways to your thermostat to what we buy in supermarket. Is that true? Is it more prevalent than most of us realize?
Yeah, I would be amazed if most of us don't interact with AI at least once per day in some way, whether you're using Google Maps or even just your email and calendar. There's a lot happening on the back end. In David, I wasn't able to respond to the garbage truck example there. If you search garbage truck AI use cases, you will actually find a lot of use cases where garbage trucks are fascinating because they've got route optimization, but you have these trucks that are driving around that can be doing other things. They can be looking at sidewalk, road quality. They can be doing other things for the city to capture that information. So even something like a farmer, there will be a use case in the future. I guess a similar example would be a database. You tell me a job that doesn't use a database, and your barista or like, you got coffee this morning, they needed a database for point of sale. And so like AI is going to be that widespread in the future.
Randy, over to you. And then we got a great question from Jen.
Yeah. So I just thinking on the, value side, I may be a broken record, but, if ultimately for anybody in sales or anybody in any company, I always say, visualize you're in the elevator with the CFO of whatever company either you just sold to or you're selling to. You have 30 seconds. And to your point, it's going to be a number, right? It's not going to be all this gobbledygook mumbo jumbo. It's going to be numbers around generating revenue, giving cost savings, giving a competitive advantage, maybe keeping out of jail if it's around compliance, but it's a number. It's not words. So I think I love how you said that.
I was laughing real quick, Randy, because I was remembering the big data hype cycle. So back in 2011, you got to buy big data because if you don't, your competitors will. And so when you're at the peak of the hype cycle, this fear selling is really funny because we see it over and over again. Like I think with AI in 2017, you got to get AI because if you don't, your competitors will. And that's so funny because where's the value?
Right.
So we got a question from Jen.
All right. Thank you, Jen. How does DataRobot use AI on their sales team?
So DataRobot does do lead scoring internally with our Salesforce data. So honestly, that's something that every sales team should be doing, capturing all those features in Salesforce and building predictive models to prioritize your time, right? Because there's so many features on an account. We have our gut. With humans, we have intuition, we have our gut. But a lot of times it is biased. So think about you're getting ready to sell an account and you get burned by that account. You are going to have a strong emotional reaction to that. And you are going to put too much weight on that observation as a human. Where with AI, you can be a lot more rational in your weighting on historical data. And that's why it's so much better for lead forecasting, but also with hiring, humans have unconscious bias. So a human reading a resume, we're going to focus on the name on the resume and other things that have nothing to do with the job qualification. And they surface bias where AI will not do that. You can engineer AI to not amplify that bias.
Ben, I know Jesse, one of our mutual friends, is a big fan of the whole no-code movement. So I'm a non-technical founder. I have a business idea. Has AI gotten to a place where I can use an existing block of technology to build something or build that minimally viable product or build a prototype to get in front of someone? Or do I need, again, an AI-specific coding expert to kind of help me bridge that gap to that business outcome I'm after?
I think we're definitely there at that point. So we have demos today on our YouTube channel where they're doing high impact business problems with no programming. As long as the data, and I'm rambling for a second here, but I want to get this thought out. Before, 80% of the work was done building the model and the process. Maybe 20% of the time was spent scoping. I feel like that's been reversed because of now with no code and platform, 80% of your time should be scoping the problem. What are you going to solve? Who's the subject matter expert? Who's going to care? How are you going to measure this? Where's the data? How do we get it together? And that's the exciting thing with no code is as we start moving from 80 to 90 to 99% of our time scoping problems, how great will that be for everyone? We won't be doing one thing. We'll be doing many, many things on a daily basis.
Got it. So let's talk about that a second. And Seidl, I'd welcome this as well. So I'm thinking of that business unit leader or business leader, regardless of whether you're marketing or sales or financial services or insurance or whatever. Who's doing this well? And when they do it well, Ben, what do they approach you with? What does that conversation look like that gives you a glimpse into that buyer is on the right path? They may not have all the answers, but they're an intelligent buyer. They know how to ask. I think Frederick brought it up, right? Do they understand what they're looking for? Do they know what problem they're trying to solve? Give us a glimpse into that buyer of the AI value. What are they asking? What do they want to know? How are they approaching this the right way? And you know where I'm going to go with this? Flip it and say, who do you can gauge early on that they're off the track in kind of scoping this or focusing on this right?
I've never said this before, but the thing that's kind of surfacing in my mind is the idea of a burned visionary. So they're visionary. They've got big ideas. They think you can do a lot of stuff, but they've been burned before. So they're going to be very focused on the value. They're not going to go chase a platform with a blue sky pitch. Because you really do want a visionary. You want someone who's kind of thinking about like what is possible, what's the art of the possible, but you need to constrain that time scale. Because I can't say what's the art of the possible in the next 2 years. That's a very scary place for everyone to be. What's the art of the possible this quarter? What could we do in the next 30 days to demonstrate value? And I don't want to have one idea. I want to have 3, 4, 5, 10 ideas, and then let's whittle them down to the one we're going to do. And so I think I'm a huge fan in people that have made mistakes, because you're less likely to jump into a situation and have, a dumpster fire. So is that a term, of the burned visionary?
It is now. And so then the ones that are dangerous are the ones that are chasing platforms?
Actually, the ones that are the most dangerous are the build it themselves. It's interesting. This isn't always true, but we do see some AI leaders or data scientists that can be antagonists in the sales process, where they will actually look at the platform price and then justify their value on their confidence that they could create one of our models in a couple months. And that's a terrible place for them to be, because we're not selling one model. We're selling a platform. Some of our customers do hundreds and thousands of models. And so we see, like, I interact with executives and I'll get text messages 9 months later and they'll say, I think I should fire my data science team. This is like 9 months later. I'm like, dude, like, maybe. Like, probably. And to end that thought, what we see is with this, these are data science teams that have been unproven. So I can go hire a principal data scientist who's been burned, multiple companies. They're going to be very expensive. Or I can hire this ambitious kid right out of school who hasn't done anything, and they're a third of the price. And we see a lot of examples where they'll hire this kid 9 months later, 12 months later, nothing's done. But there's a lot of activity. But yeah, activity is not a proxy for progress.
Understood. Randy, let's go over to you, and then we got a couple great questions coming in.
Yes, I'd say on the full disclosure, DataRobot is a client that I help out on go-to-market and partnering and selling. And one of our a year and a half ago or so, we did a great deal with the Boston Red Sox. There's my Boston Red Sox DataRobot shirt. But anyway, so from what I see on the bad side is the, kind of a little bit what you said, but I'd say it's the not invented here, right? You have these data scientists, they want to try and roll their own thing, which is just like if you're selling any technology for anything, they think internally we can go do it, better, faster, cheaper on our own. And they can't, they're going to do it worse. It's going to be more expensive. It's not going to be effective. So I'd say, I'm sure you're violent agreement, that would be the bad. And I'd say the good is for the executive reach outs that I do, CEO friends, the CEOs that really get it. There's a very large global bank. I guess we probably shouldn't say on the air, but and the CEO definitely gets it. And anytime we reach out, he says, "Hey, how about doing this? How about doing that?" So I think the best practice is it's at the board level, CEO level. They get here's how they can leverage artificial intelligence to help move all the knobs in the business. And then they've got they have a business leadership team that gets it, but then they've got an execution team that can help enable these different solutions to happen like that, like we said.
And Randy, to add to that, I completely agree. But to add to that is, I really think you need executive buy-in too, because I can take the world's best CDO, I can go throw them into a toxic environment, and the change management that they're trying to sign up for to get to success,
right?
There'll be these antibodies in the company that fight it, and they will fail. And so it really does need this executive. It's a team effort. There's not a brilliant leader out there that'll get you to success. You do need, kind of executive buy-in across the board to go after it.
Yeah, and it helps a lot in the sales cycle. I think how I've seen DataRobot evolve from a couple of years ago to now, right? If you can start out at the CEO level and you get that buy-in and sponsorship down, it helps people be maybe more open than they might otherwise, right? Because they don't want to say, geez, we tried to do this. Here's some ideas of how we could help you improve your revenue. But, your team wanted to do it on their own and they want to do it in a year as opposed to we could help you do it in 3 months, right?
Yeah. And I like to tease the hardware folks because I like to say, no CEO cares about the hardware, but we do talk to the C-suite because we're trying to find what are the problems, what's the value, how are we going to find that, and then that'll get back down to a specific problem POC, and that will run somewhere on the cloud or on-prem. But the hardware, if you're a hardware maker, you're not going to have a conversation with the CEO because they don't actually care about the features and speeds.
I worked for Silicon Graphics years ago. We always thought hardware was a necessary evil because they needed the hardware to run the software to solve a business problem. But and that's where we partnered really well with the software providers. So, Randy, we've got a fantastic question from a Shannon Seidl. I don't know if there's any relations there or not about a favorite topic of mine.
Oh, all right, Shannon, thank you. You mentioned storytelling. Can you dig a little deeper? Was this something that you were always good at, or did you need to become a better storyteller throughout your career when you're brought into the sales cycle? Great question.
I love storytelling. Anyone that's listening, there's some great books out there you should read. I'm failing on the name, but there's a book from TED, the TED speaker series. I'll see if I can look it up and come back to it. So I became a speaker for HireVue. So I've presented all over the world. I've given talks in South Africa, Madrid, Dublin, all over the US, Sydney. I love speaking. So if I can be on a stage in front of 1,000 people giving an opening keynote, I love the energy. It's fun. I've given lots of bad talks. So I've given a lot of bad talks, but I've taken audience feedback. I've tried to learn, and I've gotten to the point now that it's not guaranteed, but I've given talks where I've been the best speaker at the entire conference, but I didn't understand storytelling. So now that I've kind of learned to understand it, storytelling is the catalyst for transferring ideas. So if I need to transfer an idea to you, I can't use my tools. I have to use your tools. I can't use my experience. I have to understand your experience. And so a talk track or a storyline that'll work for one audience is not guaranteed to work for another audience. And so in the sales process, you really have to understand who you're talking to, what is their experience. The second part of that question was, when do I get brought into the sales cycle? We do see examples where evangelists can help open up accounts early on because we can go speak at those accounts, and that's seen as gift. Storytelling, I'll talk about this idea of a gift, who's giving, who's taking. And then we can come in later in the sales cycle and talk to the executives and talk about building trust and what they actually want to accomplish.
And Ben, I often talk about storytelling as a new leadership competency, because we've seen over the years the best storytellers are the ones that move their audiences, right? They engage them, they move them, they transport them there, they're relevant. The worst ones lose me, right? It's like, you lost me at hello. Like, I'm sorry, you went on tangents, or you talked about something that was completely not relevant to what's happening here. And the ones that are masterful, they have you eating out of their hands because you can't wait to see where the story goes next.
And these are three goals I would set for the group, for the individuals on the Evangelist team. If you go give an important talk, if you go speak at a meetup, that's not necessarily an important talk. It's useful. But if you're going to go give an important keynote, it needs to be the best talk you've ever given in your life. That's not always possible, but you should shoot for that every single time. Everyone in the audience should go home and tell their loved ones that day what they saw, and they should never forget it. And when you set that up for people that aren't in this space, that should overwhelm them. They're like, well, what am I going to talk about that everyone in the audience has to go home and tell their loved ones? And that's the goal, because most talks are forgettable. You can't be forgettable. You'll get lost in the noise. You go to a conference, most of the talks just blur together, and that's not transformational. That's not where we get the most value. But you also don't want to be weird. Like, you could just be the weirdest speaker, and that's not going to be valuable either.
Randy, over to you.
Yeah, so I was fine with storytelling, whether it's professional or personal, there's the concept of landing the plane, right? You don't want to go forever. So I think it's making sure that the best storytellers and the best presenters are ones that overly prepare ahead of time. A lot of people think, oh, it's off the cuff, but I'd say probably, preparing ahead of time, which I'm sure you do, Ben, right?
Yeah, for the important talks, I'll do a lot of prep. It was funny. I actually gave a keynote once in San Diego, and I walked out on stage holding my coffee, and I said, I've been thinking about giving this talk for 6 months. And I start my talk. That's called pulling the band. I didn't know what I was doing. To say, I've been thinking about giving this talk for 6 months, what does it do to the audience? The audience, they're putting their phones away, they're leaning in. Oh, something special is going to happen. And so that's an example of a little storytelling trick that I didn't know what it was, but I did it because it was authentic. The number one rule of storytelling is to be authentic. You can break all the other rules.
So we're getting some great comments. I would encourage our audience. You're listening to Ben Taylor, Chief AI Evangelist at DataRobot. Would love to have you jump in with others. We got some great questions, great comments. Ty is kind enough with compliments and is also talking about a book recommendation, Whoever Tells the Best Story Wins by Annette Simmons. Let's go. I think we've got a question from Frederick. Randy.
All right, Frederick's on fire today. Ben, how do you approach a customer that has been burned by a bad AI experience or is very skeptical about AI? Obviously not been burned with DataRobot.
Well, maybe they have been in the past. Like we've made mistakes in the past, but the hope is we make less of those now. So if they've been burned in the past, I think it's important to understand that and acknowledge that. An issue is building trust. So how do you build trust? For a buyer, if I can reduce the time to value, so if I'm pitching you 6 months to value, I'm going to have that's going to be an uphill battle. But if I can reduce it down to 30 days or 2 weeks, you're going to be much more receptive. Experience can build a lot of trust. So one thing we see in sales is they want to see a case study. So I've been burned in the past. Can you produce a case study? And we can do that for a lot of case studies. We can't do that for everything because AI is so versatile. It can be used anywhere. So that's how I would react to that. I would try to produce a case study of a name brand or close to their industry that they respect. If I can't do that, I'm going to try to shorten the time to value.
So there's a question from Jesse about coding is easy. A lot of folks can do it, even salespeople. Are you planning on building your own SaaS to, there's a second part, achieve your goals in life?
Huh. Well, so I'm hoping there's a future where I don't have to do any coding. I want to communicate with my house like I might an executive assistant or a data science team. And then I'll wake up in the morning and drink my coffee and be in my kitchen, and my house will tell me what it was able to do last night and what questions it has and where it got stuck. The thing that hopefully is shocking to the audience, if you look at the last 10 years of AI innovation, it has shocked everyone in the industry how fast we've been moving. The next 10 years will make the last 10 years seem like nothing. And so things that we should be expecting in the next 10 years is how we interact with a computer, automatic speech recognition, your personal assistant. We all carry our phones with us. Imagine actually having a useful executive assistant on your phone, or a therapist, or et cetera, et cetera. That is useful. Today, I would say it's not useful. But yeah.
So Jarvis is real.
Jarvis will seem real. You'll have people that debate whether or not he's conscious, but it's a parlor trick, right? I could convince my parents this year that AGI or AI consciousness exists, but people in the AI community would say it was a parlor trick. But parlor trick the number of people that you can trick will continue to climb. Yeah, it's a fun thing to debate about. That's why I like AI, is it kind of fits on purpose and who are we, how do we achieve happiness, etc.
So let's build on it. Let's talk about Randy brought this up. Ben, sales reps. I've always believed early on in the interview process, you can pick up some great indicators of their future success, right? Talk about some, particularly you're selling a vision, you're selling a promise, you're selling an enabler of a better place that the organization can be. Talk about some attributes you've seen in sales reps who do this really well. You brought up storytelling. You brought up getting the subject matter expert early in. What are some early predictors of sales success in selling AI?
Selling AI is difficult because it's complicated. Convincing the prospect of the problem and the value, it's a process. I think an early indicator would be, I would encourage sales reps to prioritize the customer value over their own quota. I know sometimes we get desperate and we want to get the numbers in, but if you really fight for value, so here's an example. I'm in a sales conversation. I say, we really like to put this deal together. I'd really like you to buy DataRobot. This will be great. This will be so good for your organization. Imagine what you could do. That's one. Now imagine the second one where I say, I don't think we're finding enough value in this brainstorming session. I don't know if we are the right fit for you at this point in time. Happy to be a champion and advocate for you. Happy to do other brainstorm sessions. I don't see value. What does that do to the line of business buyer? What's their level of trust for you as a seller if you fight for their value over your own quota? And I think that's something that is sometimes missed, where people can detect that, like, oh, geez, you care more about this deal than you do about my promotion or about my success.
So you're actually pushing back.
Yeah, and I have so much fun doing that in the sales conversation, because it's getting back to storytelling, surprise, and novelty. If I push the other way, so if you guys are executives, and if I get on the call and I say, AI has had a really rough go the last 10 years, it's been a mess. You're not expecting that. You're like, wait, what's going on? And I say, it's been experimental. We've had to make mistakes. We've made mistakes. We've had to learn from those mistakes. But I can come full circle with trust, where now you're way more excited to do a proof of concept, but it was unexpected out of the gate.
Mm.
Because you wouldn't expect me to trash AI, but I'm happy to trash AI.
You're disarming me with that candor, right? Wait, like, what's happening here? All right, Randy, over to you.
Yeah, I think from a sales basic perspective, I'll put in a shameless club. So my book just got published yesterday. Nour's got some great content in there. I've got 100 tech sales executive friends, have a bunch of best practices. So check it out. You can see you can get it on Amazon. You can see the URL, salescommunity.com/book. But a lot of great content, but just so much of I see, totally what you said, Ben, around the, kind of what is that value that we've been talking about, but just in terms of the follow-up, how do people really listen? How do they understand really to help create those value opportunities? What are they doing in there? How are they kind of recapping? What are the steps that they're doing? And, there's a whole kind of, obviously methodology, which there's several sales methodologies out there, but kind of, a lot of things that lead to the fact finding that then bubbles up to, hey, here's this value creation for the CEO. And the best sales teams, whether you're leveraging the reps or the data scientists or pre-sales folks, really can go on kind of a hunting expedition around these different leaders, whether it's technical data science person, business unit leader, to help figure out what those nuggets are that are of value for the company.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say real quick, one of the things I laughed about I don't want to poke too much fun at the hardware manufacturers, but I've been on some of these sales calls with the hardware folks, and Randy, if you come up with a bad idea for AI, they will say, fantastic, that's a great idea, we're going to throw some servers at that. And I think that's so funny, because now, being value focused, I'd put the brakes on it. And one of the things I say now is, if you're ever starting an idea with, wouldn't it be cool if, like AI ideation, I'll say, I don't need to hear the rest of it, it's a bad idea. Because you're never going to lead with, wouldn't it be cool, if it backs into serious business value. Because some of the serious business value, though, they tend to be the most boring problems, but they're huge problems.
Yeah.
On those attributes you rattled off. So I've got, it's difficult, it's complicated, but prioritize. I love that. Prioritizing the customer value, fighting for the customer value, storytelling, that whole disarming with candor. Ben, how would those attributes change if we're talking about now sales management, sales leadership? If I want to lead a team that intelligently, candidly sells AI as a problem solver, what am I thinking? What am I doing differently as a sales manager, sales leader?
To lead a successful team?
Yeah.
So it's all about experience capture, right? So I've got a few reps getting lucky. I've got a few reps making mistakes. I think one of the things we all struggle with as people is, how do we collaborate faster and better? How do we get our egos out of the way, and how do we transfer that knowledge as effectively as we can? And I think that's where everyone wins. And so I think really good sales leaders, they understand how they can improve their team members, how they can share experiences. And because I've seen sales teams where you've got that unicorn, you got that salesperson that it has that legendary sales number, they're crushing it, and I don't see a lot of knowledge transfer. I don't see a lot of insights coming down to kind of the junior talent, and I think a good leader is capable of that.
Before we launched our session together, you also mentioned pretty strong, as Jesse and others, pretty strong social media following as well. It seems like you've done a great job building a personal brand, and I think Jen's asking, I'm a big fan, follow you on social media. What books can I read to build my own personal brand? And what did you learn? How have you done that? How have you built a strong personal brand in the process?
Thanks, Jen. I love that question. So I think I'm going to call out Kate Strachnyi from New York. She's a social influencer out there. She's been a LinkedIn top voice. And one of the things I've learned from her is when you see these bigger influencers, you think, well, do you have posts that go out every morning at 6 a.m. sharp Eastern time where you've got these tools that manage everything, and do you post 3 times a day? You think there's a process, like they're reverse engineering it. Or at least I did, maybe having that analytical mindset. And she laughed and said, no, like I post whatever the hell comes in my head. It's out there on the wire right after it comes. It doesn't matter if it's 9 a.m. on a Saturday or 2 a.m. on a Sunday, it just goes. And so for me, I've noticed that's been really useful. It's not a game to me. We all have interesting interactions with interesting people. If you have an interesting idea, just share it in the moment. It's not a blog post. You're not going to sit down for an hour. You're just going to pick up your phone, push something out and send it. And sometimes you'll say things that are stupid and people will disagree. And sometimes you'll say things that go viral because they offended a massive audience and you didn't necessarily mean to do that. So I've had a few things that have just exploded, but that's because they've offended people. But there's some truth to there, right? There's always 2 sides to any debate.
Do you think building, as an executive, do you think building a personal brand enables the success of the organization? Because there's a lot of old school leadership that says, whoa, Ben, you're an employee of our company. I need you to push DataRobot a hell of a lot more than you do Ben Taylor. So they see it as either or. Talk about that. Talk about your brand as a leader, an enabler of DataRobot's awareness, success, but also Ben Taylor as a brand.
That's actually a trickier question because if you're a bigger influencer where you're constantly throwing ideas out, there's a risk, there's a liability there. So if you're an executive of a big company, maybe Elon being an example, like you need to have a PR team or comms team filtering everything you want to push out or say, because you could accidentally say or do something. So maybe to kind of come back to the original question, yes, I would love all executives and all leaders out there to post multiple times a day based on the insights and perspectives they have, because I would say they're useful. They're useful to a junior audience or to the rest of us. But I respect that there is a liability with them doing that maybe has to be filtered through a PR group or a channel, especially if you're publicly traded. But
a private company like DataRobot, you're not as concerned about that.
Yeah, I will call out too that I've made mistakes. Like I've been involved with like Black Mirror media. So Black Mirror is like Netflix, evil AI. People can look up. There's an article with high review called "The Robots Are Hiring" for the Wall Street Journal. So I was involved with that one on like the setup, and it's useful to kind of understand that there is fear, uncertainty, and doubt is a real driver for eyeballs and attention. And if you have elements of what you're talking about that light that fire, it can grow legs and turn, and you can get a lot more attention in ways you did not expect that are not good. They're negative.
Randy, let's go over to you.
Yeah. So, Nour, I always learn a lot from you, but in relationship economics, if you think about branding, it's all around, it's relationships. What's the value that you're providing? So it takes something to be of that stature and that level. What nuggets would you share with our audience?
Yeah, I really appreciate Ben's comment about disarming with people with candor. I think most people are going to be skeptical. Randy, when you and I first meet somebody, right, they're expecting you to have an agenda or sell or push something. And when what they really want is they want to get to know the real you. They want to get to know, and you can do that by value add without an agenda, without selling something. And I love that there was a Harvard Business Review did a whole issue on provoke your customers. And it's been a few years, but it was a fascinating look at, again, exactly what Ben brought up, that trust curve dramatically accelerates if you're not pushing an agenda up front, if you actually push back and challenge some of their assumptions, challenge some of their comments in a respectful way, but not it's almost like stop selling, right? If you stop selling and really be that advisor, if you really stop selling and be that sounding board, that independent sounding board, I think it will accelerate building and nurturing that relationship. And it actually will help you gain more of that trust that you need to move key ideas forward. You and I have had conversations over several beers on this. Do the right things and the sale will come. But if you lead with the relationship, and Randy, you're masterful at this. If you lead with the relationship, those that get it, and this is probably what's happening to Ben and team, those that get it will seek him out. Those that get it will say, love that idea. Tell me more. Love that idea. Let's go with kind of what you're thinking and that approach. And you'll earn the right to build that relationship, to nurture it, and to really move those ideas ahead. Ben, have you found the same?
I've definitely found the same. And one of the things I like to tease salespeople with is, are you giving them a gift? A demo is not a gift. So for me to sit you down and say, hey, 90-minute demo of DataRobot, that's not a gift. It takes some cognitive load to, really focus on all the features. And so I'm a big fan of gift giving. What is the gift? Networking can be a part of that. Helping people. If I find out you're hiring, can I help you hire? So really leaning in on the initial discovery call and figuring out what is the gift I can do. That is one way. It can't be two way. Because if you feel like, hey, Randy, I'm going to help you hire someone, wink, but you better come, you're gonna realize that right away and be like, that doesn't work. So
they disengage. They actually, it turns them off in a big way.
Yeah.
So Randy, on that note, you're kind enough to bring up relationship dynamic. Jen's got a nice comment and a question for Ben.
All right, great, Jen. Ben, I've been reading Dave Nour's new book on relationships. It's awesome. Talks about the economics of relationships in his life. Who would you say has been the most impactful on your career?
Oh, that's
present company excluded, of
present
course.
Company.
I think it's been Randy. Man, that's really hard to. I probably have to call out Mark Newman. So he was the CEO of HireVue, raised $20 million from Sequoia. He was an investor in our startup, and we used to call him Startup Jesus. So if you're ever having a bad day, getting sued or something, you can call up Mark and he'll laugh at you because he's had much worse. So he's been useful. That's hard. I feel like I consume as many authors as I can because there are so many books on Audible. You have no excuse not to be reading these fantastic books. You can be doing it while you're working out, running, listen to 1.7 speed or however fast your brain can handle it. I can't go 2x. I get confused.
How about let me Jen, thank you for the kind comments, and let me flip that. In Curve Benders, I talked about people that have a profound impact on your life and really shape your journey and your destination. I think a more interesting question is those that you've impacted. So through your own journey, can you think of individuals that you've had a long-term impact on, and what did you do? How were you able to either set them in the right direction or help accelerate their path through that? How did you create that lasting imprint in their lives?
I think the best thing you can share is experience. So we've all made mistakes, and when you talk to junior talent, one of the things I do is I will make myself available when I'm driving in the car. And some people think this is bizarre because random people will call me. And I've had some fascinating conversations with really interesting people. But that's an opportunity where I can give some advice, where I've talked to junior data scientists that have actually complained about similar platforms. They're like, hey, I don't like using this because I don't know how the lasagna is made. I'm just making lasagna. And I laugh at them and say, you're making a lot of lasagna. That's great. Make more of it and you'll get promoted. And then that individual reached out a couple years later saying your advice changed my life. I just think that stuff is silly because the only reason I know that perspective is I've made all those mistakes, right? It's not like I'm a wise sage without being burned and going through the meat grinder. And I don't think I'm that wise of a sage, but we all have experience we can share with junior talent. And I think that's probably been the biggest impact I've been able to give. All my mistakes.
Before we give Randy the final word, what are you most looking forward to on the other side of this pandemic?
International travel. So I've been traveling a lot in the U.S., east to west coast. That's fun. Getting my Delta miles up. I can't wait to start doing international travel because DataRobot, we're a global company. There's some really interesting places that need us to go to with people on my team. I've got an 11-year-old daughter who loves to travel too, so she really wants to go to Japan and hike Mount Fuji, which I think is hilarious because I don't think she knows what she's actually asking for, but I'm happy to sign up for that adventure. So it's all about memories, right? You want it to be memorable. It doesn't have to be enjoyable.
Absolutely. For our audience, if you joined us late, you've been listening to Ben Taylor, the Chief AI Evangelist at DataRobot. Absolutely worth looking into both Ben's personal brand as a thought and practice leader and really democratizing and scalable AI, but also DataRobot seems to be a fantastic company doing some really interesting things. Randy, would love to hear quickly about the book. You got a brand new book I've got my copy right here. And for our audience, it is signed. So if I put it online, it should fetch more of a fee. So the copy is right here. And then talk about sales community a second.
Yeah, so great book. Anybody in sales who wants to know more about sales, definitely recommend you get it. You can see the URL there. It's really meant to be marked up and get some tips and tricks and things that you can do. So as I said, part of it was I had these manila folders, and before I died, I want to be able to share some wisdom, and this is it, as well as wisdom from 100 other fantastic folks. And then Pedro, thanks for the comment. And then sales community. It's funny you're talking about some of these themes, but we really find the people that can be authentic, that can ask questions, get some great feedback, get some great answers. So definitely check out sales community. The idea is help people learn more and sell more. And Ben, I couldn't have asked for a better lead-in. You talk about gift giving. So next week we have Chris, who's the CEO of Sendosa, does a lot of things, but at a corporate level, they do a lot to enable creative gift giving, which unto itself, is something of a value prop. It really helps people, get that at bat so they can get attention. So maybe, hey, we'll choose some AirPods if we can get on the phone with you, which may be cheesy, but their business model works and they're completely cranking. So that was a great lead in for our guest for next week. And Ben, thank you so much. We all hope that Dan Wright gets better, but you were fantastic and far exceeded expectations, and sure we're going to get lots of great feedback and follow-on views. And Nour, as always, fantastic job. Really appreciate it.
Randy, thanks, Ben, for joining us. For our audience, I'm going to start quoting key sections of the book just to give you an idea. Page 137 is a section from Peter Bell: sell yourself, sell your company, and then sell your product. People want to do business with individual relationships. On behalf of Randy Seidl, I'm David Nour. This has been the Sales Community's Tech Sales Insights Live. Join us next Wednesday, same time, noon Eastern. We always have great guests, just like Ben, joining us. So we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you.